Lend your ears, lend your hands, lend your movement, anything you can. Come to teach, come to be taught, come in the likeness and the image of God. 'Cause you can be like that, with all that humbleness and all that respect.
Organic farms here started in our minds 20 or 30 years ago, and it really is a food security project. If you look at what's happening in the world today, food security is a topic that's starting to become norm in the newspapers in a very slow way, but actually food security has been on most government agendas for over 30 years now. And more than the yogurt's going to hit the fan over the next 2 or 3 decades. Basically, this is where we are today. As we all know, as population growth keeps happening, we're going to have to more than double our food production over the next 20 to 30 years. And that was considered a reasonable goal to achieve, but it's no longer reasonable. Because basically, about 8 years ago, all these other statistics started to come in, and when you merge them together, it's actually an impossibility in the way we do agriculture today. Because we're going to have 1/3 less resources of soil and phosphate and half less water to more than double food. Now, why would we have 1/3 less phosphates? Well, we've hit what we now call peak phosphates. If you want to invest on something on the stock exchange, phosphate is the thing to invest in. It'll just keep escalating. You can't grow phosphates, you can't synthesise them. They're a mining product. Our own supply of phosphates will diminish completely by 2015 here in Australia. It's something that you need to actually incorporate into your land, because you won't be able to import it. China's closed off its phosphate exports for that very reason. Now, I'm not trying to sell shares here, because I don't believe in the stock exchange, I don't invest in it, so please understand, I'll just use that as a statistic. I think it's just a system that's bound to fail in its own self. Why would we have 1/3 less soil? Believe it or not, 45% of the Earth's surface today is used for growing food for humans. 45%. You take the cities and deserts out of that, and it's a lot of the Earth's land. 50% in America, 50% in Turkey. Australia, it's a lot less. We have lots of deserts in the middle, etc. But it's 45% of the Earth's surface. And 1% of that good soil disappears every single year. Why does it disappear every single year? Mainly from urban sprawl. Do you know a city in the world that's not just growing continuously? Pretty much every city in the world was growing on the most fertile soils in the world, river flats. And they just keep expanding and expanding and expanding, so the best soils get taken up first. And so according to NASA satellite surveillance, 1% of that good soil disappears every single year. So you project that for 30 years, 30% disappears. Yet we're trying to more than double food production. Water is such a serious situation at the moment. These aren't things that, these aren't conspiracies, these are realities that we've got to face. If you look at water supply, when you talk to a greenie, they tell you the water's got to go all the way to the ocean, yeah? And they're right. All of nature needs water. But you ask a farmer, what do they say? No, we need the water because we're growing food for everybody. And they're right. And then you ask a city person and you say, well, we need the water to drink and for our gardens, etc. And they're right. So when you have 3 parties that are actually right, you've got a serious problem. If someone was wrong, you'd say, well, the facts are wrong. You don't need the water, but everybody needs the water. So, 45 or half less water because we're trying to double production. Yet we're not going to have that supply, let alone the aquifers that are draining all around the world. So, as I said before, more than yogurt's going to hit the fan. I can look at the screen. We became involved in organics nearly 30 years ago. I don't know if you've read the book Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. If you haven't, please read it. It's actually the book that launched the modern day environment movement, the modern day organic movement. Rachel's work is just profound. And this graph here is actually a depiction of what Rachel wrote about in Silent Spring. What happened at a place called Clear Lake, a lake about 150 kilometres north of San Francisco. The local fishermen complained about a gnat or else of mosquitoes. They didn't like doing this while they were fishing. So the local authorities in their scientific mind said, well, why don't we kill the gnat? And so they decided to spray dichlorodiphenyl bichloroethane, DDT, a relative of infamous DDT most people know about. And they sprayed at that ratio at the very top, at 0.02 parts per million. That's a ratio of 50 million parts to 1. So for every 50 million litres or kilos of water, the equivalent of 1 kilo only of DDT was used. And according to the science of the time, that was sufficient to kill all the gnat but harm nothing else. Well, what happened after 2 consecutive sprayings is numerous birds were found dead in the area. And when it was further investigated, it was actually from DDT poisoning. So what happened? This phenomenon we now call biomagnification or multiple toxicity up through the food chain. Because when the plankton were investigated, they were found to have 5 parts per million. Excuse me. They were found to have 5 parts per million in their bodies. So when the plankton were investigated, they were found to have 5 parts per million. So the biomagnification or the increase in concentration of DDT increased by 250 times. When the herbivores, the vegetarian fish, were investigated, they had 40 to 300 parts, and the carnivorous fish that live on those fish have a massive 2,500 parts per million. So that's an increase in concentration of 125,000 times. So why did the birds die? They eat fish. Who's at the top of most food chains? We are. We now know polycyclic biphenyls, PCBs, can biomagnify many millions of times. Now, it doesn't mean that if you don't eat organics, and I hope you do, and if you don't, I hope you do from today onwards. It doesn't mean you're going to get nauseous if you eat a non-organic food or you're going to get faint. Such things generally don't occur. A very rare person feels that much difference. But there is an accumulative effect. That is, it'll take 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And there's only 2 reasons why someone will actually die young of a disease that's created by such organic chlorines or organophosphates, or they can live a long time. And like my grandfather smoked till he was 97. Why? Well, it depends on 2 things, your body's metabolism and your body's immune system. If you've got a very high metabolism and a good immune system, yes, you'll discharge a lot of these toxins, and you may take poisonous things for a long time and live a lot old age. But if you're young and you've got both of those very low, well, you could get a cancer at a very young age. Most of us are in the middle, where these sort of chemicals have the accumulative effect after 30 or 40 years, in our 50s and 60s in most people's cases. So most of us are susceptible to such toxicity. Because they're actually fatty, they're actually oil soluble, most organic chlorines, organophosphates. They store in your fatty tissues, so they accumulate over time. So we realised some years ago that organics has like a domino effect on everything in life. If you look at the problems in Africa, people say it's because of their economy. It's nonsense. It's because their farming has gone from growing food for their villagers to growing roses for Europeans, for goodness sake. You know, and then of course cartels take over those places and want to, you know, exploit that even further. It's food. Our land, of how we use it, causes these sort of things. It's very, very important. In fact, believe it or not, you and I can change the world, and I hope you join today, from what we eat 2 or 3 times a day. It is this simple. Cars. There's a great study by the Rodale Institute. It was a multiple year study, and basically they concluded that for every 3 acres of land converted from conventional agriculture to organic agriculture was the same as taking 1 car off the road when it comes to carbon dioxide and other toxic emissions into the atmosphere. To me, that didn't sound like much. For every 3 acres of land, you take 1 car off the road. But it's a lot. Get this. As I said before, 45% of the Earth's surface is for growing food for us, for humans. If we converted 40% of that land, 40% of the 45%, from conventional to organic, as far as carbon emissions and other toxic components going into the atmosphere, that's the same as taking 750 million cars off the road. That's every car on Earth today. 40% of the Earth's surface has gone to organic. Only 1 to 2%, depending on what country, is organic currently, but that's a realistic goal. And it's quite exciting as we can do that from what we choose to eat. So what is organic farming? Organic farming is comprised of these 3 basic principles. Certainly, of course, clearly it's about organic food. It is about being local, and I'll explain why local shortly. And it's about ownership. Now, ownership, yes, people own shares in organic farms, but our translation of ownership is relationship, both with the land and other people. It's responsibility. True, when you take ownership of a problem, you're actually taking responsibility, are we not? So that's the translation of ownership in that sense. This is a bioregional map of Australia. The green area here, I would assume that most of us, if not all of us, live in this area. A bioregion is created by natural circumstances. In case this green area was created, it's called the Wollumbin or Mount Warning bioregion. It happened when Mount Warning exploded. The Glasshouse Mountains on the Sunshine Coast are part of the same eruption. So that's the Wollumbin bio, and we work in that region. Now we work in that region not to create a new state, but to start really having us all understand where we live, where our resources come from, where our lives come from, where our food comes from. So if everybody started to understand their real bioregion, very difficult in a city environment, but we can actually really start to understand. These boundaries are very common in the original people of all countries, be it New Zealand, Australia, etc. So working locally like this actually has a profound effect. This is our food chain here in Australia. It starts off with generally finance in most cases, for equipment or farm itself. It goes to the farmer, processor, distributor, retailer, and finally we get food. It's a very long chain. The average meal in Australia today travels more than 2,000 kilometres. That is an enormous cost environmentally and of course economically. And that's the breakdown of the cost in that corner there. The green area, it's actually what a farmer gets, roughly 15%, depending on what they farm, of course. The black is actually inputs, another 15% of inputs, that is fertilisers, weedicides, pesticides, etc. And going back to that point, pesticides, do you know what pesticides are? People just think they get rid of pests, and the word pesticide, eyeside actually means to kill or murder, like homicide, to kill or murder a homo sapien, a human being. Pesticides were not created to kill insects. The origin of pesticides, and this is a historical fact, anybody who wants to study chemistry, was actually created as weapons of war to kill humans. They are nerve agents in the case of organophosphates. They were created to kill each other. At the end of World War II, there was quite a stockpile of these chemicals. So the people who had them decided, well, we know they kill insects too, for goodness sake, they kill humans, let's use them in agriculture. So we started to fight nature as opposed to working with nature. So pesticides are absolutely unnecessary. And we've shown that on our farm as well. They're absolutely, whether they're conventional or even so-called organics, they're unnecessary. Packaging is actually 10% of our costs, and mainly because of distances. So 1 in every $10 of our food is actually to get it to you in a box or something. Now, in a shop you'll see one package, but behind the scenes there's a lot more packaging than that. You know, generally 24 of those packs go into a big box, and maybe 50 of those boxes go into a pallet, and this is shrink wrapping and all sorts of materials like that. There's a lot of packaging that we don't visualise, and 10% of it. So going local means you can actually reduce that significantly. You don't need to wrap a piece of lettuce, for goodness sake, in a plastic for any reason. So this chain can be reduced significantly. The big grey area represents this whole chain here. It's 60% of our cost. In other words, the cost of food, for every $100 you put over the counter, $60 of it is not for the food, it's to get it to you. Isn't that phenomenal? That's significant. Now, we haven't got that far to our equation, but we're now, produce from our farm, our watermelon, for example, was $1.95 a kilo. Woolies conventional, just last week, was $2.50 a kilo. Ours is certified organic. Generally, organics is 80% higher, not a few percent lower. So you can actually make it viable. Of course, it's about people, it's not about the normal distribution system. We have 364 households that are owner members in Organic Farm Share. I got dyslexic then, it's 346. I just said 364. Been doing that quite a while now. 346 households. They range from a single person who's 21 to a 74-year-old. 1/3 of our shareholders are families who have anything from 1 to 5 children. So it's quite a diverse group in that sense. So what is Organic Farm Share? Well, it is a hybrid. We're an unlisted public company. There are certain requirements in this country if you want to raise shares. We're not on the stock exchange, I don't believe, as I mentioned before, in the stock exchange, so we're unlisted. But it's a hybrid, and the hybrid was actually the beautiful part my brother helped design, is it actually incorporates a lot of cooperative values. We have a lot of cooperative values embedded, so it's a hybrid that evolves around the owner, member or shareholder, which is a term, well, that's actually a young shareholder. Or her parents, through her parents. Isn't that a beautiful shot? Yeah, that's better than a teddy bear, I reckon, some spring onions. So people do invest. There is actually a $4,000 investment in organic farm shares, so it's not quite a house or a car, but it's a significant input, and it's a very important part. There's $4,000 across many hundreds of families, contributes to something very substantial. In fact, we paid off the farm within something in the vicinity of 12 to 14 months. So, you know, we don't have a mortgage on the farm. In fact, we never started with a mortgage. We have a relationship with the previous owners and we paid them off. So whatever money we raised, whether it's $5,000 or $40,000 a month, went straight, 85% of that money went to the farm. So this principle allowed us to be mortgage free very quickly. So produce from the farm. Community, it's a word that I don't like using because, you know, we talk about communities in Australia. We don't live in communities, we live in areas. How many of you know more than 3 people in your block? You know, it's very rare. Yeah, I'm sure there is. Well done. But you're a rare person. Very few people know 3 or 4 people in their street. So we live in areas. The word community, one of the meanings of a Latin origin means common unity or common purpose. So I can honestly say organic farm shares are community emerging because there's a common unity, a common purpose of creating a new food distribution system. So that's a true meaning of the word community. So this is our farm here. That's the Google map of it. It's not very pretty from the map point of view. That's the Richmond River, the bottom tree line there. There's a lot more trees than that. But the top line looks like a straight line, like a fence. There's no fence there. That's actually the Border Ranges National Park. In fact, that mountain that's on your left-hand side up the top is our backyard. So above there, that's the mountain, Mount Ernie. That's where our water supply comes from. A lot of our good weather. That black hole you may see at the top left-hand corner, but it's not so black. That middle picture is the pond we have there. So it is a beautiful farm, but it also was chosen for many characteristics. There's, you know, you have to look when you're buying a property. What we found around the world was the best farms in the world weren't like most Australian farms, which are on flats. They're always between mountains and river, and hence that's why we chose this property. Because what do we learn in primary school hydrology? Water goes from mountain to river to sea. So why try and irrigate something on a flat when you can actually harvest water on the way through your property in a natural environment? In fact, there's a 43 or so metre drop from that pond up the top down to our cultivation area, which is this bottom area here. So I'll take you to the next photo. So this is an artist's impression of where we're taking the farm. So there is an undulation in the property, and that's perfect for irrigation. Why? Because you don't need pumps. The best engineers don't use pumps. They use gravity. And that's the most important thing. When you've got enough drop, you have enough head, so you get enough water pressure in your irrigation. So when we have a breakdown, it means something's in the pipe. It doesn't mean you have to go mechanically find a piece. You know, well, we don't have that. You have to go to town, they don't have it. A week later, you get your irrigation fixed. You don't need pumps if you use nature properly. So we gravity feed that down the bottom, all the flats at the bottom, and quite a lot of the property actually frosts. Even though we're subtropical, it frosts about 20 days of the year, which means, and we do grow apples, pears, peaches, plums, apricots, figs, etc. Yet on the high parts, about anything over 300 metres does not frost so we can grow bananas, papayas, etc. So you can have what we call a polyculture system. I'll explain a bit more about that shortly. Just going back one slide, our first step always is actually to harvest water. Water harvesting, that design, we work with people like Jeff Lawton from the Permaculture Institute. I think he's one of the best water harvesters in the world. So, you know, we're designing each property. We've got one at the moment, of course, so we harvest the water correctly. This country, you've got to be able to. Now, harvesting water does not mean stopping water like a giant dam. It means slowing the water down, which means the whole ecosystem still gets it. And there's a big difference there. Soil, you know, if you don't have bacteria in the soil, for starters, plants can't live. I don't know if you know, but nutrients, most people don't know for some reason. but nutrients cannot be absorbed directly by plants. And if you're water soluble, they can, but that doesn't mean you've got a healthy plant. You need bacteria. Bacteria create enzymes which in fact allow the roots of the plant to draw nutrients. So you create healthy bacterial-rich probiotic soils, you will have extremely healthy plants. Full stop. When you have healthy plants, you actually don't need insecticides, weedicides, etc. It's funny how simple an equation it is. We get far too complex. Some of the best scientists that I've ever met in the world give you one answer every time you've got a root disease, a branch disease, a fungal problem. Compost, compost, compost. It really is a solution. It's really quite extraordinary how we get all complex about looking for it's like the medication system. Everybody's trying to solve different things. I've never taken medication in my life, not even an aspirin. For goodness sake, I don't even know what it tastes like. I don't want to learn what it tastes like. I've got nothing against medication as such, but I think the medication of ourselves for the sake of getting rid of a problem is an issue. There's no medicine without a side effect. That's a fact. So, take it cautiously if you take medicine. Anyway, so soil bacteria is very, very important. Integration, animals. We are a polyculture farm. I'll explain that shortly. And of course, we do need to go through permits and things for buildings as we construct, etc. And we're certified organic as well, so we need to go through all those processes. So we are a polyculture farm. We have cattle, we have chickens, we have beehives, very colourful beehives. Our children love painting beehives, and I think they're a lot of fun. 12% of our shareholders are vegetarian, so it's a very high proportion, which means 88% aren't. So we don't subscribe to a particular diet type except pure food. I'll leave that with each person to distinguish what that means. We do encourage, and I don't mean we force, I mean we just say, look, if you're going to eat a cow, please witness a cow's birth and witness a cow's death. And one of two things will happen. Like one of my daughters became a vegetarian. True. And or you become very respectful of what you're eating, because a life has given itself to you. So that's a very important paradigm, I think, for people to have. We have chicken caravans. Our fourth one is being built. We pick those up, one of them for free, another one for $1,500. So they're all broken down caravans. We cut them out. Inside the chickens lay eggs, etc. It gets moved to fresh paddocks all the time. So they are chicken truly mobiles as such. That sounded like one of our chickens. They make the most beautiful laugh. We have about 400 or 500, between 400 or 500. I don't count them, of course. And of course, bees are very, very essential. So a polyculture farm takes a lot more effort to set up, because you're actually creating a farming ecosystem, but it actually will take care of itself, and in some areas it already is. We grow lots of vegetables. That's Brian, our new and super duper farmer, next to the sunflowers. Under his feet is grass. That was taken probably December, to guess. Since then, there's hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of watermelons, pumpkins, beans, peas, and that growing there. We incorporate the Three Sister system. It's a North American Indian system that's been around for many, many, many thousands of years. Basically, they call it the Three Sisters, which means corn, which grows up, beans, which grow up them, and things they call squash, so things like pumpkins grow out and cover the weeds. That system is brilliant. They obviously didn't know the science behind it, but from observation they realised it works. And it's very interesting because we use both corn and sunflowers. They grow up. They create some stalks for things like beans and peas, but also they're full of carbon. Beans are full of nitrogen. So in fact, corn takes a lot of nitrogen out of the soil, and that's why nitrogen fertilisers are required, generally speaking. But if you plant it with a bean actually takes nitrogen out of the atmosphere and fixes it into the soil. So you create your own nitrogen cycle on a property. If you can create that, you've got it. And of course, instead of just having squash, we have pumpkins, anything that goes out, cucumbers, etc., watermelons, honeydews, etc. So the Three Sister system is 9 or 10 sisters at the moment for our property. But the wonderful thing is that's actually just been cleared, that area. I mean, we've harvested everything. from that whole area, you know, thousands of pieces of food. That was we go in half-acre plots. And now the chickens are in there, so they'll eat everything in there. All the sunflower kernels that have dropped to the ground, they're just eating everything. And of course their manure is ammonia, which when it actually gets with soil bacteria, it turns into nitrogen. So you don't have to have nitrogen fertilisers. You create nitrogen cycles, high growth cycles, carbon cycles on a property. It's a big investment in time and energy, but it's worthwhile. So you create the feed for the property. We currently still supplement our chicken feed. That's being reduced pretty much every month until we build up that. That's just being done now. We don't want to bring anything in off farm. So that's a very important system. And sunflowers are beautiful when you walk into a paddock. And the funny thing was, actually, just recently, a number of farmers locally had all their watermelons explode because it was such hot weather. Ours didn't, because they had the shade of sunflowers. And it's very, very interesting. Not something we expected, but it's something that did happen. So we have a lot of protesters. I love this word, protesters. In fact, these are people planting our fruit trees. Where they're planting, that was probably 18 months ago now. Those trees are 2 metres high, so they're getting quite good. They should have fruit on them. But a lot of them have 1 or 2 apples, 1 or 2 oranges, etc. But next year we should get quite a lot of fruit from them. Protest is a very interesting word. The word protest, most people visualise as stop that, yeah? Is that right? Pretty much. Protest, the Latin origin of the word, protestado, actually means something completely different. The test part is to testify. Pro is, of course, for. To testify or give evidence of. It's a legal terminology. In other words, a true protest is just to say, hey, there's a different way to do it and this is it. Give evidence. So these people are real protesters, not the conventional protesters that we think about in society. And this is the kind of protest I love. Wouldn't you love that? Much better. So as you can see, it's a prolific amount of foods that can come out of there. They're real activists too. You know, kids and pigs go down really, really well. Activist, again, is a word that is really misunderstood. Activist, of course, comes from the word active. In other words, it's to do something about something. We've got our activism again about trying to stop something, and that's a good thing. There's a, you know, both sides of the equation, but we don't do enough of replacing that and giving an alternative to. And that's the most important. And I'll give you a demonstration of how we go about things. There must be somebody here in this group who has a really, really strong grip. Anybody here, you know, who can really grip like a vice? Yeah? Someone's pointing at a gentleman up there. Okay. This is what we do in society. We want to fight, yeah? Come on, don't stop that, or you run away. Now let me do that. All right, that's good. This is what we do in society. We're always doing something like that. There's a third option. And the third option is leave the problem where it is. Of course, it's an AQ move, but it's actually you leave the problem there and you enter. I can move anywhere I want to. In fact, I can make all sorts of things like that. Nice dance, you do like that. The point there is actually we either fight or flight is the old terminology, but we can actually just leave the problem where it is. My instructor taught me that. I mean, he's a brilliant instructor, but it's something, you know, we don't have to fight in the conventional way. We enter, actually the word is idimi, to enter into a problem. And it actually takes a little bit of courage. And I'm very grateful, and there's actually 4 or 5 shareholders of Organic Farm in this room, thank you very much, because that's what's made Organic Farm Share. It's not Marina and Alf, it's actually everybody who said we're going to make this happen through good and bad times, and that's what's happened, and I'm really totally appreciative of that. So, of course, yeah, there's more activists there. Some of them are pretty casual, as you can see. More activists, we train our activists very young. We have working bees, what's called working bees. Some people don't work at all and other people work all day, depends on their nature, once a month on the farm. So the first weekend of every farm, sometimes we have 5 people turn up. The largest one we had over 100 people, that was quite a day. So we employ farmers, of course. We don't have to all work on the farm, but people do want to, touching the soil is a very, very important part. We also have excursions. These are actually on the farm. That's a creek that runs through the property, so it goes up to the national park. So these are just pictures of different walks on the property, up the creek beds and things. They're just beautiful walks. I mean, we walk for 4 or 5 hours each way. It's just, when you're walking up a creek in bare feet, you really feel like you're part of nature. It's really beautiful. So these are the sort of things that happen on the farm. I was barefooted that day, not out of planning. There's a young lady who turned up and she didn't bring her shoes. And mine was sort of fitted her. So, anyway, it's another story. So, this is where the farm is here. It's actually the green. It's actually on the Border Ranges National Park. It's actually right on the border of Queensland and New South Wales, and northern New South Wales. The very top blue circle is Brisbane, which is about 150 kilometres away. The three circles on the right there's the Gold Coast, which is also about 150 kilometres from the farm, and the bottom ones are Byron, Mullumbimby, etc. And also the circles are where our owner members are. We've actually decked out a very large bus. That's actually a shop on wheels. Those pictures there are actually inside the bus. It's 3,000 litres of refrigeration, 1,000 litres of freezer. So that goes in different locations. I was there in Brisbane this morning at the bus. We open between 8 and 11 today. So it goes to different locations, and we also started different farmers markets, like at Norby Street here 2 weeks ago, and different farmers markets around the place. So it's a shop on wheels basically. More and more. We do have some chefs. One of my favourite chefs is actually here, Despina. She's one of our owner members. She doesn't have time, but she's so busy with her other business to do things like Noura does. What Noura does, Noura Tashiro is one of our chefs. When I say our chef, she's a shareholder, and whenever, like last time, there were lots of pumpkins left over, so she takes them, makes them into a beautiful 2 or 3 varieties of pumpkin soups, and then of course we sell them through the organic farm share. So it really is as close to the food source as you can possibly get. We also have a luxury safari tent, the first of many on the property, so people can camp. These are pictures on the property where these 2 ladies are here. And Ed and Chris, that's where the safari tent overlooks, that's the view for it. So it is about a place where people can actually be part of the land and really own it, responsible for it together in that sense. So we have to actually do things all in a legal sense, so we've got an offer document. We of course submit to the Australian Securities Investment Commission. We have an offer out now for more shareholders till the 30th of June. This year, so we are looking for more shareholders to complete. We bought the farm in the first offer, we started the distribution in a small way, the second one, now we're actually just finishing all the infrastructure and things. We're building sheds and things like that on the property. So what's in the offer document? It's of course all the legalities, but it also has the risks. Every business has a risk. Or many risks. We've identified 11 here in this document, so if people are interested, and if you are interested, please leave your name at the counter out there. We can send you out the document. It'll be out there on the bench there, and there's some newspapers that we produce for organic farm share, so please take one home if there's some there. There should be some there. So what are the risks? Well, environment technically is a risk on a farm. Anything can happen on a farm, so there's no guarantees nothing will ever happen. The government's a risk. They can change the rules, and you have to, work with that. People are even a risk. It depends on how much they participate. We don't need people to participate as such, but it's when I mean that on the farm. But the more people do, the more the farm gets developed, and it really is that sort of situation. It also says who owns what. So everyone's got there's a share structure there, a pay structure. In our it's got the Constitution. Our Constitution also reads that the highest paid person can never earn more than 7 times the lowest paid person. Why? Because CEOs around the world, when things become successful, can earn 30 to 300 times the lowest paid person. Personally, I think that's insanity. Personally, in this kind of scenario. Especially if it's somebody else's business, it's a public company, it's not your own private thing that you created. So we've got a limit of 7 times. In fact, my wife and I don't earn a wage or salary. We put it into the document, 3% of what comes in with a ceiling. So both of us together can never earn more than the highest paid person in the organisation. It's not, it will pay, it's just not right now. So the offer document is very important, so people go in eyes wide open of how things function, etc. Our Constitution also reads that if we buy another property, 67% of people have to vote in favour. For very large decisions like doing, even to sell the property, 80% of people have to be in favour, so you can't just have a radical group. I don't believe in 51, 49% voting, because it means half the people pretty much are unhappy. So when you have the vast majority, it's a strong. So putting those things into the constitution also protects us from any form of takeover and things, so because people are limited to what they can attain as shares and things. So a 2020 vision, we're quite ambitious in that sense. Beauty is our paramount objective. Now that may sound like a wishy-washy word in any enterprise, but is it? Imagine if every business in the world had beauty as one of its criteria. Would we not have a beautiful world? It doesn't mean it's not profitable, it's not functional. It means it's beautiful, and I think that is absolutely important. Of course, my wife's embedded that into the whole ethos of everything. It's about organic food. We eat life to live. Food is our connection to the environment. If something's going to change seriously in an environmental movement, it's actually from being directly connected to your food source. Every society in the world that was once harmonious, it's all around meals. It's all around food, for goodness sake. You know, ni hao ma in Chinese doesn't mean how, well, they say that means how are you, but actually directly translated means have you eaten? Food is the way to get back to understanding everything. When you see an animal die, or when you plan something yourself, whether it's lost or grows, it's very significant. When you have this distance away from food, anything goes. It's only about price. Now, price is something that we're challenging, we want to challenge, but it's like it shouldn't be the only thing. It's a global enterprise. Global meaning it's local, but has global ramifications. We get inquiries all the time from all around the world. Of course, we've got to make this one sustainable first and properly. And as I mentioned before, it's about ownership, which is a relationship with other people and the land, your food source. That is the land in that sense. So this is actually, Marina normally talks about these things. So if you wanted to start one yourself, Marina normally summarises these things of what's required. You do need to have, for want of a better term, that vision of saying, let's do this. But you need a participatory vision of many people saying, let's do this. And that's very, very important. Now you need a structure. So, we wanted to, from the very beginning, saying, love business. We've been fortunate enough to have a successful business. One of my business partners here today, Colin. So we previously before Organic Farms here, we were fortunate enough together to grow a successful business in the organic industry, which is My Essence. You may have heard of My Essence products. You need the leadership. But leadership is about the creative force, of course, and it means other people. You need a presentation so people understand what you're doing. Co-partners is actually shareholders. Our first objective is land debt free. So that's our first objective. If you don't have a mortgage, you don't have to worry about mortgages. Okay. Got to have plant trees. That's something Marina put in. If we made, we've made several mistakes. You always do when you start something. No one ever, if everybody says that something went perfect, well, you know what to think about that. One of the things is we postpone planting trees. The first thing you do after getting a property, as far as we're concerned now in our process, is plant thousands of trees. Because by now we'd have probably 50,000 fruits coming off the farm too, if we did that in the very beginning. So that's something that we've learned, and we'll take it into the next process. So plant trees is paramount. We've got nut trees, of course, all kinds of fruit trees growing, of course, now, but one thing at a time. And you've got to hold that vision, because nothing is ever a straight line. Life is a wave, we all know that. The waves can go in this direction or that direction. And of course, whichever way you do. So, but if you don't want to do it yourself, we invite you to join us. So thank you very, very much for your time.